where you see professional agitators, I see courageous citizens who have a righteous indignation and a moral outrage when their city, and this is Prince's city now, you know, it's Sign of the Times, 1987, when it's being terrorized, it's being traumatized. Communities are being vilified and demonized. Now, I come from a people who have been demonized and vilified and terrorized for 250 years in the American experiment. That's what it is to niggerize a dignified black people. Make sure that they are intimidated, terrified, full of fear, and not able to straighten their backs up. But thank God the Black Freedom Movement straightens our backs up. Well, what we're witnessing, and this is why the larger picture is important here, we're at we're right on the edge cliff in terms of the possibility of America sustaining itself as a social experiment in the best sense, or just becoming an empire full of might and force. So when you niggerize a whole country, you start treating all of your citizens the way black folk have been treated for 250 years. So when I see the police killing these two precious folks, Sister Renee and my dear brother Alex, and I've had so many partners killed by the police growing up on the chocolate side of town, right? What has been the response? Thank God for Martin King. How do we learn how to love in the face of this hatred? How do we learn how to fight for freedom for everybody in all parts of town in the face of all of this terror? And America now has the blues. If you don't learn something from the best of the blues people, we're going to lose the democracy. So this is not just about meticulous details. We're talking about something huge at stake.
And this is Politics by Jake Hyde. This is a Saturday show. It's absolutely necessary for the Democratic Party to take as one of its goals. And I know this is going to sound crazy. You're going to say, this is Jake. Jake is going crazy again. Let's go watch the Super Bowl pre-shows. Jake's not crazy. It's absolutely necessary for the Democratic Party to take as one of its goals the destruction of oligarchy. Donald Trump is a tool, as you know. I've talked about that. We're going to talk about that more on the show. But he's going to play his parts, just like Shakespeare said. Poor player struts his hour on the shades, tells the stories full of sound and fury, and then after that hour, he's gone. Poor player. That's all he is. He's a poor player. Someone's going to come after that. We cannot let this country be run by the likes of Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, etc. after Donald Trump is gone. It cannot be. You know, there are more of us than there are of them. Yeah, they have the money, but that's not even exactly true too, either. But they have the money. They have the superstructure, but there is one thing that will continue to be true. They're actually, when things don't go to plan, they get pretty damn stupid, and they don't know what to do. But about the last remaining weapon we have available, which is voting, I hope we still have voting. I don't think, and you know, my colleagues are saying to a greater or lesser extent the same thing. I'm saying I don't think they're going to be able to completely shut down the elections. They may shut them down enough. We're going to talk about that later in the show. But I do know that they can be leveled. And I've talked to you about this. I talked to you about this like with the Weimar Republic. General strike. They would be wiped out and controlled by a general strike, which would shut the country down. Will we ever get to that point in this country? How about a tax strike? Like some of the governors of the states have suggested, we just don't give you our tax money. Will any of that ever occur? I don't know. You know, I told you, I've been saying to you on my shows, especially in January, welcome to the show, and that's certainly true. Welcome to the show. Welcome to 2026, and it's going to be an eventful year. There's going to be a lot going on, and one of the things that's going to be going on is to fight for free and fair elections. And I will say this, that if we can't save this, we're going to lose it. And everything that my dad, for example, fought for in World War II and became an alcoholic and became post-traumatic stress disorder, and nobody would ever tell me, because in those days it was all John Wayne. You get wounded, you put a Band-Aid on it, and off you go. But everything that my dad fought for, and your parents also, your moms and dads, and those of you who have been out there on the picket lines. I know that a lot of the people who listen to this show are pro-union. They're pro-labor. I think this is great. And you guys were out there on the picket lines when the response to the picket lines was, for the cops to come over and maybe shoot you while you were on the picket line. And this is the way it has happened. We'll be talking a little bit about that too. This is the world that the oligarchs, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, this is the world they want. We've already seen people being shot in the street for being human beings. We've seen there's a 67-year-old man, right for mercy, with regard to his possible expulsion of someone by ICE, and have authorities show up at his door to ask him about his email to get his side of the story, to intimidate this man, because he had the nerve to write, to suggest that maybe this man deserved to stay here no matter what the law said or what the new law said. We're reenacting, and my colleagues and others who are in the fight, because as I have said, the media, the corporate media has failed. The corrupt, as I call it, I just don't say the media, I call it the corrupt, controlled corporate media, the 3 C's. It's failed. And we have this alternative media, and it's got to stand up, and it is standing up, and I am part of it. But we are reenacting everything from Germany in the 1930s. Sometimes I'm not quite sure where we are, Sometimes I think we're, obviously, from listening to me that I know a little bit about this stuff, but sometimes I think we're already at about 1938. Sometimes feels more like we're at about 1934, but take this to the bank, will you please? If I skip around in the years, we're somewhere in there, in that 1930s Germany. And we all know how this ends. And all of us, including myself, who said this is where we were going to go, were right and are right. And, we welcome, as I say on the show, I welcome you, the rest of you who are understanding this now. And I say this with absolutely no snark involved, because we need you, we want you. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing the show. It's tough to recognize, isn't it, that this was the plan all along, or that this is how it has evolved. But it's important. It is imperative. It is literally your life that you understand that this has happened and why. this has happened. I was listening recently to a discussion on the radio about what's happening in Minnesota, not just Minnesota, but other states as well. You have this, you know, this idiotic thing that's going on where you have Border Patrol agents and they're in Minnesota. What are they doing in Minnesota? Well, I'll tell you. But, because I can tell you this. What we're watching right now is not border control. It's not immigration enforcement. It's not even law enforcement. It is occupation. And occupation, has a feel to it. It has a texture. People recognize it instinctively. And this is part of what I will call an invasion. Because honestly, it's the only word that fits. An invasion of the federal government into a sovereign state using ICE Gestapo goons. And if I'm going to describe the nature of that presence accurately, I have to borrow from the animal world, from the insect world, This is an infestation. And an infestation doesn't announce itself as an emergency. Instead, it embeds, it normalizes, it spreads until people are told, it has always been there. Move along, nothing to see here. Not just in Minnesota, not just in other states, but in our communities. I also heard that the NFL is being pressured to take a stronger stand against what's happening, and that matters because this isn't merely abusive. Abuses would be bad enough. It's outrageous. One can imagine ICE coming down on the field in the middle of the game and arresting someone because they're Somali or they're Bangladeshi or they're just whatever it is that they are. It's just outrageous. It's an insinuation into the freedoms and values of all Americans. That's why people are upset, because they get it. Even if they don't listen to Politics by Jake or any other media, they're upset. They're not confused. They're not misinformed, but they are morally alert because they know something fundamental is being violated. Here's what's really going on, okay? You have a class of oligarchic money power interests who use the issue of immigration to obtain illegal labor. And they are illegal employers. That's what's really going on. But they're the ones with the money, you see. And because they have the money, they have the political power. So let's be clear. And I've actually been saying this for years. We do not have an illegal immigrant problem in the United States. And of course, what's going on right now has nothing to do with immigration. But just in order to address the titular, the nominal, the ostensible problem, which is the reason why all this is being justified, we do not have an illegal immigrant problem in the United States. We have an illegal employer problem. Power always tries to redirect blame downward. That's how hierarchy protects itself. And so these people invent stories to hide their own sin, if you take my meaning. Their constitutional sin, let alone their religious sin. We're not talking about that. Their constitutional sin, their moral sin, their sin against humanity. And yes, their sin against the very Christian traditions they claim to honor. Traditions say that these people are our brothers and sisters, and that you welcome the stranger, and yet they treat them brutally. they commit depredations against them, and they justify it with pride. They're illegal. You've heard this stuff before. They're illegal. They take American jobs. This is nonsense. History is very clear about this. Migration does not follow chaos. It follows opportunity. The Goths crossed into the Roman Empire, the late Roman Empire. Why? Well, actually, I take it back. They actually crossed into the Roman Republic too. So why did they do it? It was economic opportunity that did not exist elsewhere. It's the same today. And they did it. They did it in the empire too. People need to eat. People need to feed their children. If you're a loving father or a loving parent, and you look at what's happening to your children, how they're oppressed, how they're starving, you feel like you would almost do anything. Like I said, people need to eat. They need to feed their children. They need to make a life. And for that, you need economic opportunity. And, what makes this truly obscene is that employers, and I'm talking about employers specifically, cruelly and callously allowed this system to exist because it benefits them. They don't have to pay as much. No paperwork. They don't have to document. They don't have to provide the protections that were paid for in blood, sweat, and tears. And I'm talking about everything from the Haymarket Street riots in the 1880s onward, the labor violence that gave us the rights we now take for granted. A 40-hour work week, forget it. There was no such thing. Child labor laws, forget it. There was no such thing. And you have Mehmet Oz here, by the way, beginning to talk about getting children working into the labor force earlier. Well, that would be just what the oligarchs would want. So there was no such thing, and we forget that people died, they suffered, and they bled for those protections which we now take just as like normal. And now we watch as ICE infests our communities, enters business without warrants, without probable cause, and now even inserts itself into our most symbolic public event, the Super Bowl. Think about that this weekend. This is Super Bowl weekend. Where's the probable cause there? See, this is why warrants exist. This is why you need a judge. ICE is trying to say, oh, we just need an administrative warrant. No, you need a judge. You need someone from another area of power. This is why the state must explain itself before it acts. Because once you accept warrantless intrusion, look, I suppose there's an argument to be made here. But an administrative warrant, that's crap. It's crap. So I say, once you accept warrantless intrusion as normal, an administrative warrant is really no warrant at all. You have already surrendered the Constitution in practice, even if you still praise it in words. Administrative convenience is not constitutional authority, and a government that no longer needs to explain itself has already crossed the line. And this is Politics by Jake. Welcome to the show. We'll be back.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
And this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. Welcome to the show. President Trump has recently said, and he says this kind of thing a lot, that control of elections should be taken away and federalized. And he said at least 15 states. And now I ask you, do you not see this? Do you not see that this country is in the hands of a madman? Do you not see that this country is in the hands of someone who wants to destroy the Constitution and has already done many things towards the end of destroying it? I did a piece about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, comparing the depredations of King George III, which the colonists listed in the Declaration of Independence, to what the Declaration of Independence is the document that states why we should be free, and it lists the things that King George III had done against the colonies. They're listed there. There's like 34 of them, something like that. And I compared these to what Donald Trump has done. If memory serves, it was something like 32 of the 34 listed abuses he has done. That's not rhetoric. That's comparison. So you maggots, yeah, and I mean you maggots, M-A-G-A-T-S, you politically unwashed, you untutored, the ones who listen because I say interesting things and you want to hear more. Do you not see what this man is doing? Through ignorance of the Constitution, through wanton disregard for it, through an unrestrained lust for power. Now, let me widen the frame, okay? Because this is just not an American story. You have 33,000 dead. That's the most recent figure we have, about a week and a half old, because there's been an information blackout. 33,000 dead in 2 days. And I'm talking about Iran. Put this in perspective. Gaza saw roughly, and of course Iran says, oh, a couple of thousand. That's literally what they say. Put that in perspective. Gaza saw roughly 60,000 deaths over 2 years. This is 33,000 in 2 days that's being reported. Now, watch what happens next, because this is where selective outrage tells on itself. The same people who care so deeply about Hamas and the plight of Gaza, a territory of roughly 2 million people, say almost nothing about Iran, a country of 90 million people. What about Sudan? What we're seeing there appears to be religious intolerance, sectarian violence, proxied through forces operating out of the Arabian Gulf and the Persian Gulf. This is not accidental, because the butchers, the mullahs of the Islamist regime, do their work behind closed doors. Trump even announced during one of his cabinet meetings, which you've heard me laconically refer to as the Court of Miracles, because everything, he states things that are not true, and he characterizes them as miracles. $2 gas. It's a miracle. Greatest economy. It's a miracle. See, it's Court of Miracles. That's why I say that. Trump announced that he had authoritative information that there would be no more public shootings. Now think about that. That doesn't mean that the killing stopped. What it means is it went underground. The doors closed. The witnesses disappeared. And I don't know whether Trump believes this. He's obviously deranged. But understand this. This is the connective tissue that people refuse to see. Religious intolerance has always been one of the primary engines of mass violence. Always. It's the focal point for despair, for depredation, for cruelty on an industrial scale. We like to look at each new crisis and say, oh, this is different. because, we're living in it and we hate to think that we're just like people who have gone before. So this is different. No, it's not. It's the same pattern repeating itself. And when I refer to proxy groups, let me be very clear about what I mean. I'm referring to the mother regime in Iran. That is the sponsor. That, in my opinion, that sponsor, that regime, is behind what we're seeing in Sudan. It's behind what we're seeing in Lebanon. It's behind what we're seeing in Gaza, with the Houthi movement. And now the affiliated branches operated in Syria and Iraq. Different fronts, same hand. This is not chaos. This is doctrine I'm giving you here. Now, like I said, we keep telling ourselves that what we're seeing right now is new, modern, unique, somehow different, but really it's not. Religious intolerance, like I said, has been one of the central engines of mass violence, not just in the last 100 years, but almost as long as humans have been organizing themselves into belief systems. From the ancient world to the medieval world, from sectarian wars to modern proxy conflicts, pattern is the same. Doctrine hardens, identity becomes sacred, dissent becomes heresy, and violence becomes justified, even virtuous. What changes are the weapons. I'll grant you that. I'll grant you that changes. But what doesn't change is the logic. And once you understand that, a lot of what's happening right now stops looking chaotic and starts looking familiar, because this isn't about borders. It's not about security. It isn't even about politics in the narrow sense. It's about power cloaked in righteousness and the willing to destroy others in God's name or history's name or destiny's name. And that's not an aberration, you see. It's recurring. It happens over and over and over again. It's a recurring human failure. And until we're honest about that, we're going to keep acting surprised every time it happens again. I remember my history professor at Dean. I went to Dean College, one of the schools I went to. And he was intense. He was the kind of guy who you would go to the normal history class, Western Civ, just whatever it was, and then he would have what he would call labs. So it wasn't enough just to go to the class. You had to go to a lab. And he hit this stuff really hard. And one of the things that he said, I was, 18 years old, 19 years old, something like that. He said this thing that I'm telling you about now, that all of the wars, so much of the terror has been started because of religion. I wish I could remember his name. But I remember him just as sure as he was sitting right in front of me, I can see him. And, I think he was right. He educated me on that. He was the first one. So this isn't something that I come upon soon. It's something that I came upon very early. And the weight of a professor of history was not forced upon me. I mean, I paid for the class. And this belief that is not known, generally not known even today, people don't think about it, was imposed upon me so that I had to open my eyes and look at it. And at this point, let's take a break. This is Politics by Jake. Welcome to the show, and we will be back.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
All right, this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. Welcome to the show. So I've been doing this thing, about the Night of the Long Knives. That was Hitler. That was a German thing, and it was basically it was quelling internal strife. That's what it was. And I've pointed out that this is happening in the Trump administration. So you have Dan Bongino. He's out. And I had been talking about him, especially what will probably become an infamous image, because it really kind of is in a scary way. The video clip of him in a Gestapo-style duster, very dramatic, very bold, very masculine, very authoritarian. And he's out. He's back at his podcast, more familiar territory, I guess. And that's exactly the point. This is why they dress that way. This is why they pose that way. They want to look powerful. They want to look feared. They want to look like men who dominate, because they see themselves that way. And I don't know, maybe it's some kind of crazy reincarnation fantasy of a stormtrooper, some bully who once beat people in the street, mistook fear for respect. Maybe it's karma. Maybe it's pathology. It doesn't matter. He's out, period. He's gone. And notice something important here, though, that there is no repentance here, none. Some people simply are the way they are. They're just that way. And they don't repent. They justify themselves. I was reading a comment, I think it was in the Atlantic, about Pete Hegseth, and the writer was describing how he delights in violence, not tolerates it, not rationalizes it. He delights in it. He loves it. And that certainly tells you something fundamental about a person. Maybe he was hit too much. I'm just engaging in idle conjecture here. Maybe he was hit too much. Maybe mommy and daddy didn't love him. Maybe he's just a bad seed. I don't think we need to diagnose it. We just need to remove it. Because that's the kind of people Donald Trump puts into power. Crackpots, violent people, perverted people, people who admire Nazi Germany and aren't afraid to cosplay it, people who want to abuse their fellow human beings, megalomaniacs. A man who talks about invading Minnesota, who has already invaded Minnesota, border control, immigration in Minnesota. He talks about invading Greenland as if the world were a monopoly board. One of these crackpots is, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I'd call him a quack, but that would actually be unfair to quacks, because at least quacks usually have a medical degree. They're doctors. A quack is a disreputable doctor. Maybe he's quack squared. Maybe he's a subprime quack. Maybe that's what it is. Putting a man like that in charge of health and human services is not policy. It's mockery of the systems that have been put in place. So far, things have been pretty quiet. And that actually worries me, because when the next pandemic comes, and it will, I am genuinely afraid there will be no defense. In 2020, for all the confusion and chaos, we had something. We actually had something that worked very well. We had isolation that worked during the bubonic plague, the Black Death, in the 1400s. We had masking, we had distancing, we had public health coordination. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do pay attention to the evidence. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Most conspiracies fail that test, but when credible evidence does appear, you don't ignore it. Credible evidence from credible people. Trump calls COVID the China virus. He likes to do that. I don't find myself actually violently disagreeing with that framing, because historically many pandemics have emerged from Asia. Hong Kong flu in '68. You've got Zika right now coming from the Indian and Asian area. But here's what should disturb you. And it's more than that, but I'm just giving you a couple of examples. Here's what should disturb you. I heard a credible account from a doctor with security clearance describing biomedical labs in the United States performing experiments on COVID variants. In other words, they were doing things like they were altering the viral structures to increase lethality. That's not internet nonsense. That's whistleblower level information. And it's happening behind closed doors. And we need to expose these things. These things need to come out. This brings me to Kristi Noem. There's currently a bill in the House seeking her impeachment. And interestingly, very interestingly, around the same time, she announced a withdrawal from Maine. Yes, that's right. ICE Gestapo is in Maine. I don't know what the hell they're doing. I don't know what they're doing up there. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist, however, to understand cause and effect. Now, let me return to one of the doctrinal rails of this show. They were talking recently about Steve Witkoff, a real estate guy Trump knows from business, a transactional guy, not a diplomat. And that's key. This is fascism in its most textbook form. Control of the means of production by private business interests. And Trump does not understand business, Trump does not understand government. He understands business. Government is service. Business is extraction. And Trump only understands the latter. Yes, he's a criminal. Yes, he's a felon. Yes, he's been adjudicated a sexual abuser. Those things matter. But even if you set them aside, even if you forget them for the sake of the argument, he's still unfit. You've heard me talk about the fact that he's unfit and that he shouldn't even have been able to be elected dog catcher. And of course, the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which states that anyone who has supported insurrection against the United States, and he has, is not qualified, not capable of standing for any office, state or federal. And I've talked about that on the show. We'll talk about it again. But even if you set these things aside, even if you forget them just for the sake of the argument, and say these things don't exist and they don't have weight, he's still unfit. Because he does not understand constitutional government. What he wants is autocracy. He wants to be the state, like the czars of old Russia, Alexander, Nicholas. They were autocrats. They are the government. They were the government. There was no government. Everything went through them. an autocrat who is the government. He's persuaded a portion of the electorate to hand themselves over to that fantasy. How? By lies, by grievances, by propaganda, by pretending that he's like you and me, and that he's interested in the same things that we're interested in. And most recently by suggesting that states should lose control of their own elections. This is not reform. This is chaos. And it reflects the inner chaos of the man himself. This destruction of customs, of mores, the practices older than any single statute, is ruinous. These are traditions that are hundreds of years old, woven directly into the Constitution. And he is tearing at them because he does not understand them and he does not care to. Now, let me say this plainly. What Trump represents, okay, is fascism. And we do not owe fascists fairness. We owe them legality. We owe them due process. We do not owe them moral indulgence. Fascism is anti-constitutional, and it must be named as such. Many people are now saying what I have said for a long time. Trump is either a dictator or he wants to be one. For years, Fox and its offspring, Newsmax, OANN, it's One American News Network, along with fellow travelers like Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan, have pushed the lie that government itself is the enemy. Well, Donald Trump actually, or I'm sorry, Ronald Reagan actually did that. They elevate Trump as the savior. Some call him a god. Some call him a prophet. I mean, really, they really do, guys. A god, a prophet. Second coming of Christ, some say. This is delusion. Trump is a doofus. I mean, he really is. He's a grifter. He's a con man. He's a criminal. He's a felon. And that is precisely why he is useful, because behind him is a cabal, including tacticians, ideologues, financiers, and yes, useful idiots. Yes, Lenin or Stalin's useful idiots, the ones who can always be persuaded to work against their own personal interests and to do the state's dirty work. These men in the jeans, they don't even have proper kit, some of them. Have you seen this? They're in jeans. They've got ski masks on. They're wearing motorcycle helmets. They're wearing, I said ski masks, okay? The ICE insignias, agents, you see them without insignia. Modern stormtroopers, they're being used. They're the useful idiots. You're looking at them. You can point to and say, Jake said these are useful idiots. But they are. And while most people struggle to keep their head above the economic waterline, this project advances quietly, deliberately, and in plain sight. The overturning of elections, the federalizing of elections, the stripping states of authority. Remember what happened in Fulton County recently? Just recently. I think it's within the past week or so, where the federal government came down and seized all the election records. Remember that? Remember, this just happened too. Pam Bondi is demanding the voter rolls for the entire state of Minnesota. These things are happening. I'm not talking to you about fantasies. These things are being implemented. They're happening. And it's not accidental. Although, don't get me started about Fulton County and the reasoning of the election officials in Fulton County. But what you saw in Fulton County is not accidental. What you're seeing being demanded of Governor Walz is not accidental. It's part of a coordinated plan. And it was conceived long before Trump ever understood it. Trump doesn't care about the plan. He cares about himself. And that is why he is the perfect interest. All right, at this point, let's take a break. We'll be back, and this is Politics by Jake.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
Hi, welcome to the show. This is Politics by Jake. I am Jake, and we are back. This also happened recently, too. A federal program that actually saved $500 billion, literally, by instructing consumers on how to use their electrical appliances so that, among other things, they save energy. It was just canceled. $500 billion. And the reason given, it was this. It was Donald Trump that said this. It didn't need to be a federal program. It could be handled by private interests. You should pay very close attention to that because we're in the middle of something right now. We are becoming, or already are, a fascist system. Heather Cox Richardson recently said, this can't go on. If there's 3 more years of this, we're going to lose it. I think she's right. I think that's true. That system is moving towards dictatorship. I told you, I think we're in the 30s in Nazi Germany. Sometimes I think it's the mid-30s. Sometimes I think it's the later 30s, but we're there. We're there. People don't like to talk about things like fascism. They think it's impolite. They think it's gauche. Or they think it's hysterical. It isn't. It's necessary. Because if you don't understand what fascism is, you will not recognize it when it appears. And you will not know how to resist it. I heard someone recently say, and I told you this, that sometimes it feels like we're in 1938 Germany. Other times, maybe 1934, but here's the key point. Everyone who said that we are heading in that direction, and I was one of them, was right. And you know what that means? It means it behooves us, if these things are true, it's high time to know the enemy. During World War II, the United States military produced an entire series of films, and they were called Why We Fight. And they weren't propaganda, they were education. They explained to soldiers why they were fighting, what they were fighting, and what they were fighting, and moreover, what they were fighting for. And that's where we are now, because what you just heard, the justification for canceling a public program, is fascism. And I'm not saying this metaphorically. I'm not saying this rhetorically. I'm not saying this oratorially. I'm not saying this because I have a radio show and I need to fill time. No, this is fascism. This is textbook fascism. This goes back to Giovanni Gentili, 1922. It was restated later, interestingly, by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1936 when he was running for election. And the classic definition of this, and you can actually look that up on YouTube. The classic definition is this: control of the means of production by business interests or private interests. It could be that also. And it is enforced through the state. You can call earlier versions proto-fascism if you want. I personally think the Ku Klux Klan, I think that was proto-fascism. I do think that was a proto-fascist organization. And that's a legitimate academic argument. We're long past that now. But this is fascism. When a leader says in plain language, and I'm telling you, he did say it. I heard it with my own ears. We don't need a government program. This can be handled by private interests. That's not policy preference. That's doctrine. When Zoran Mamdani, mayor of New York, says, as he recently did, in a face-to-face meeting with Trump after he got elected, he said, this was actually kind of cool in a way. He said, "You're a fascist." He was stating an absolute truth based on political doctrine that he understands and the things that Trump actually does. So you can argue about the aesthetics of fascism. You can argue about its ugliness, its violence, its symbolism, what's fascist, what's proto-fascist. But as a political system, that statement is fascism. I heard it with my own ears. Private interests. That is the means of production being handed to capital. That is the state withdrawing from service and becoming an enforcer. And that is not subtle. That is fascism, right out in the open. Textbook. And this is Politics by Jake.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. If you think owning things in your own name keeps you in control, think again. In today's world, lawsuits, taxes, and predators are everywhere. That's why the smart money hides in plain sight. We help you to build legal firewalls, LLCs, land trusts, private contracts that protect your assets while keeping you invisible. Call Twain Consulting today at 310-997-2204. Find us on Facebook at Twain Consulting. That's facebook.com/Twain Consulting. Protect what you've built before someone else takes it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. And now let's pause for a brief commercial message. Are you tired of the noise and the spin? Do you want the real story behind the headlines? I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake, where I tell you what they won't. And now, we're going even deeper, and I need your help to keep doing it. Join me on Patreon and support independent political analysis that doesn't pull punches. You'll get insider breakdowns, you'll get bonus clips, and first access to new content. So go to patreon.com/Politics by Jake. That's patreon.com/Politics by Jake. No filters, no fluff, just the truth. Let's do this together.